Hi everyone and welcome to our Carcanet book launch. My name is Jasmine and I'm very happy to welcome you to this launch this evening where we will be celebrating Richard Price's new collection, The Owner of the Sea. It's just published this month as a Carcanet classic. We'll be joined by Richard. He's going to read to us this evening, and we're also joined by David Kinloch. Many of you will know him as a Carcanet poet. You can find his books on our website if you don't, so do go and check them out. I am going to hand over to David in a moment for a proper introduction. I just want to let you know what's going to happen this evening. So we'll be here for about an hour. Richard will read to us from the book. While he is reading, I'm going to show the text on screen, which should make it easy for you to follow along. I just want you to know that you're in control of your own screen. So if it doesn't look right for you or you want to change it, just have a play around and you should be able to. If you've got any questions about that, pop them in the chat and we'll try and help you throughout the event. After Richard has read to us, he will have a bit of a conversation with David about the book, and then we would like you guys to get involved with that conversation. So I can see that some of you are saying hi in the chat. Please keep your chat messages coming. We love to read them. Please also find another button, which is called Q&A. Get your questions lined up for Richard, and David can put them to him later on towards the end of the event when we open up to audience questions. We want to get you involved in the conversation as much as possible, even though we can't see you. So the final thing is thank you so much for paying your £2 to be here. We really appreciate your support. You will get an email tomorrow that gives you a code to buy a discounted copy of the book, and I'll put it in the chat for you later on towards the end of the event. So don't worry about that right now. Okay, I think that's all the technical stuff out of the way. So without further ado, I will invite David to join me on screen and we'll get going.
Thanks very much, Jasmine. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here and great to see such a fantastic turnout for Richard's wonderful new book. And thanks to Richard also for inviting me just to say a few words by way of introduction. What I'm going to do is simply give a kind of short appreciation of Richard's poems and try and pull out some of the salient issues and points that occurred to me as I was reading through it. And then I'll hand over to Richard and you'll hear from the man himself. For those of you who are anxious timekeepers, what I'm going to say will last approximately 10 minutes. So when people who live anywhere other than the Arctic think about that region, they usually, I think, see landscape, seascape, first of all. We see glaciers, ice flows, icebergs, etc. And then, thanks to David Attenborough and some talented documentary filmmakers, we see animals. We rarely see human beings, and when we do, they're often scientists or visitors to that region pointing cameras. When I got to the end of Richard's poetic retellings of ancient Inuit tales, and I thought back over that reading experience, I was struck by how omnipresent the Arctic landscape had been, but how little I had noticed it as such. In Richard's retellings, the Arctic is not landscape, but a kind of being that manifests its presence through the interventions in the landscape that matter most to the human beings that inhabit it. Igloo, stone house, oar, kayak, cairn, hole in the ice, drying rack for boots and skins. In these poems, we see with great clarity in close-up features of landscape and daily life that usually are completely invisible or simply overlooked. They turn the Arctic from space into place. And because they're of such importance to the survival of the humans who both make and care for them, we experience them as the Inuit do, as more than landscapes and more than built environments. They too are creaturely, animated with spirit, and translated quite literally as such by the Inuit peoples in the retellings of their ancient myths and legends. So it is with the human beings and animals which lie behind the creation of Sedna, the owner of the sea, and the Odysseus-like Kiviuk, who are the principal heroes of these stories. Just as the environment in these tales is dipped in a kind of believable magic, so the individuals who people this land are always more than they seem. The opening and the closing poems of the Kivyuk sequence asks us, have you seen Kivyuk? Have you seen Kivyuk? The insistent nagging questions. See, the implication that seeing is somehow more than just seeing, sets the pattern for the tales to come. So what Richard treats us to is a choreography of reiterations, multiple variations on the attempt to see Kivyuk and Sedna, values that they represent more clearly. Sometimes that attempt to grasp and understand Sedna and Kivyuk are not easy. What at first sight seems to be a woman or a man shapeshifts over the course of a stanza. A husband becomes a dog, a wife becomes an Arctic fox, a wolverine sounds like a sleazily articulate barfly. Animals in these retellings are at least as important as the human actors. But it's important to state, I think, that the blurring of these lines is not solely the result of a belief in a kind of interspecies spiritual dimension. This interchangeability of human and animal comes from their interdependence, which is rooted in the facts of everyday life. It speaks to an intimacy among creatures, human and animal, that our own Western ancestors were familiar with too, but which we have largely, and to our impoverishment, set aside. These ancient stories, these wonderful stories, are full of common human emotions, emotions that animate all of humanity. Here we find extravagant but economically expressed versions of lust and revenge, self-sacrifice, envy, jealousy, love. You sense in these modern retellings that at origin, these stories were in fact anecdotes, gossip, momentary buttonholing, magnified by the power of song and oral incantation into myth and legend. It's, I think, one of the achievements of Richard's versions that they managed to convey both a kind of sketch-like quotidianness and the aura of magic. This is the result of long practiced sleight of hand, a technical deftness that understands just which word or stanza or line break will suggest more. There's a confidence in the reader's imagination that comes from long practice as both a writer and a reader. Of real significance also in these versions is the element of humor. Somehow or other, Richard has managed to tap into the specific flavor of Inuit humor and marry it to a 21st century taste for deadpan, or indeed its very opposite, a marvelous Rabelaisian enjoyment of the scatological. Perhaps the real creative spark in many of these pieces comes from the way a kind of literalism is smashed up against a concern for the moral and imaginative dimension of the stories. In Richard's introduction, which is really very interesting, and in Nancy Campbell's excellent afterword, attention is drawn to the way contemporary social issues and tastes emerge from decisions relating to adaptation and selection. So Kivyuk's possible bisexuality is hinted at. Gender identity is construed as profoundly fluid. Some relationships sound a little bit as if they started on Tinder and perhaps ended up there as well. There's a funny poem where the wolverine mocks Kivyuk and his wife for completing each other's sentences. What I'd like to stress, though, is that this doesn't strike the reader, or this one at any rate, as an attempt to graft contemporary attitudes onto Oriental material. It's not an attempt to make these stories relevant to modern audiences. Rather, this dimension seems to me to emerge naturally out of Richard's other poetry, which is often characterized by a real interest in the nature of human relationships. in what ties and binds and often dissolves. It's not simply witty or funny to catch glimpses of 21st century modes of storytelling in these stories. Rather, it's really quite moving. We seem to witness a genuine excavation of emotion, of the need for others that makes us fully human. Something, of course, that we've become so acutely aware of over the course of the past year. So I'm going to hand over now to Richard and just let you hear some of these fantastic retellings for yourselves.
Thank you, David. That's such a generous introduction. And thank you for being compere for tonight. So I'm going to read 3 segments of the book, and they will appear in a second. Just after the gorgeous cover. The first segment is from the story of Sedna, and I'm going to give you a fair tranche of this, and even to the ending of it. I'm not going to give you it all because there are little ears in the audience behind the screen, and so I've censored just slightly some of the more explicit stuff, and maybe that's a taster for the book. The right song disguises any creature. When he sang, he was a man to me, more than any local boy. You may not see my face, he says, but please touch my hair. I reach in beneath his hood. My fingers touch. His hair is soft as down. I was between sleeping and waking, ocean and cloud. I was flying. My arms encircled him. I clasped my fingers together, held fast. I woke to the stink of fish breath. My lover is a bird spirit, a fulmar, a short arse, half albatross, half gull. I do not love him, but I miss him. He stays out days to bring the best back for me, but fish is fish is fish. Sometimes I sing to myself. I imagine my father hearing me, locating sorrow from a song, finding me, leading me to safety, taking my hand and teaching my abductor a lesson or two. Here he is, finally, my father. Not a day, not a week, but a year later, persuading the waves, please, if you will, make way for me. 2 miscarriages. Make way for me, my lover had said, and I made way for him. Not lover, captor. He scales the cliff easily, since he grips his beloved fish knife between his teeth. He has the appearance of smiling. When they discovered the murdered bird spirit, it wasn't the storm his friends called down on us that made escape impossible. It was the song they sing to this day, rage in grief. My father was the first to break, pleading like a seabird himself. Have the girl, have the girl. Please, let the waves equalize us in loss. He bundled me, flailing, choking, into the blue. I believed I was not made to sink. I bobbed up, found the kayak, and gripped. She won't let go. I hack at the tips of her fingers with the fish knife her mother gave me. The scraps of flesh drop. Seals bob up. And still my daughter holds on. She won't let go. I hacked down to the knuckles with the fish knife her mother once gave me. The scraps of flesh drop, walruses bob up, and still my daughter holds on. She will not let go. I hacked down to the last joints with that blunt old fish knife her mother once gave me. The scraps of flesh drop, whales bob up. My daughter's hands are just stumps. She sinks. You'll have to visit me if you want plenty. In my new home underwater, my hair easily tangles. And these likenesses of seal and walrus and whale are not clasps or hair clips. They're spirits caught up in the snags. I've no fingers to clear them. You'll have to visit me if you want plenty. Send me a hunter, a powerful singer who will jab me, make me bleed, but comb my hair softly, who will release all the animals with the gentle strength of song. So the next section I'm going to read, we switch from Sedna, the sea goddess, the owner of the sea, to Kiviuk. Now Kiviuk is a hunter. So we're following his many travels, his many adventures, really, with the animal and spirit world. The first bit I'm going to read is really how we first see him in the myths, and that is slightly it's slightly Knight's move. It's slightly lateral. It's someone else, a young neighbor, a little boy, is recounting how he first saw Kiviuk. And again, I like the Knight's move on the chessboard. I like the lateral, and I really like the way that this myth starts. That's just to warn you about the way into this myth. So the speaker is a little boy. It's not Kiviuk. And Anyakuk is it's a shaman, a healer, a sorcerer. My grandmother was an Anyakuk, but even shapeshifters, travelers in the spirit world, even healers need a helper. They need company. I was given to my grandmother, a trade maybe. I know I was an orphan. Kiviuk was our neighbor then, a young man. He wasn't mean, unlike certain other boys. Leave him alone, he's half your size, he told my tormentors, but they were quick to reply. Keep that big opening in your face shut, or we'll shut it up for you with blood. His father had been one of the Chitalit, a half seal, a selkie, a merman of a kind. You'll have a word for it in your own language. He would help the hunters. Where seals claw out a breathing hole in the sea ice, hunters wait by the opening. A seal comes up for air, and then the hunter has him. Never forget, melt some snow so the dead seal spirit can drink. One day, Kiviuk's father was under the ice. He found a handsome seal for the men and chased it towards the surface. The seal was life, and he was clever. It dodged the harpoon that lay in wait. Some say the hunter at the breathing hole was jealous of the seal man. Kiviuk's father was harpooned in the seal's wake, and the breathing hole filled with blood. Never forget, melt some snow so the dead seal's spirit can drink. Grandmother, I don't want to go out of the snow house. I'm not the strongest of boys. I already have rips in my hood where the gang has torn at my parka. I already have bruises where the gang's stones have hit me, or cuts where the gang's sticks have jabbed me. Do you want me to lose an eye? My grandmother sent me out anyway, and I collected another rip in my hood for her. My grandmother sent me out anyway, and I collected another bruise for her. My grandmother sent me out anyway. And look, here's another cut for you. My grandmother sent me out anyway, and I refused. When darkness falls, she said, kill me a baby seal. I waited for darkness. I slipped out of the snow house. I made my way to the sea ice, and I found a baby seal. With the harpoon my father had given my grandmother for safekeeping, I killed the baby seal. It took more than one jab and less than 7. Did you drip melted snow in the seal's mouth to quench the spirit's thirst? Yes, grandmother. You should have used a club. You've damaged the skin. You should have used a club. The seal felt more pain than is right. Since my grandmother was an Anya cook, she repaired the cuts. Since my grandmother was an Anya cook, she stripped the baby seal of its skin in no time. Since my grandmother was an Anya cook, she stripped the baby seal without a single rip. She took care to cut around the eyes. Even the eye holes kept their delicate shape. Put the seal suit on, she said, and I put a seal suit on. A very good fit. You already had seal-like eyes. You take after your father. The disguise is perfect. As this is your first seal, we should have a celebration. But there are 1 or 2 tasks to complete before then. Do you recognize me, grandmother? Don't mistake me for a seal and kill me. Women don't hunt, now do they? I will always recognize you. Of course, women hunt, but my grandmother knew that. Now, do you know in the dripping part of our home, there's a puddle? I know it. How could I not know it? My grandmother had been training me to hold my breath in its water for months, for so long that the white pelt of the seal I wear is now out of season. Will you dive into it, my seal boy? I made no reply. I dived into it. A little later, swimming from one hole in the universe to another, I surfaced. I was in a puddle on the other side of the settlement. I am my own bait. I'm a seal walking through the settlement. The boys who gave me their presents of bruises and cuts begin to follow. Kiviuk's there, and like any person, he would like to kill a seal. Or does he understand a white seal at this time of year must mean enchantment? All run after me. Since seals seldom win running contests, I only just make it to the sea edge in time. They are in their kayaks, but when I'm a seal, I'm a good swimmer. They're in their kayaks, but now I'm feeling more human than seal. They're in the kayaks surrounding me, and their harpoons are poised. Grandmother! If it was right, and I was strong enough, I would still carry that boy on my back. If it was right, and I was strong enough, I would still carry that boy within my parka. He'd peep out from our hood, proud as an owl, resting on an ancient Inuksuke, this cairn of me. Grandmother! I heard and I saw the threat to him. Not a simple task to fashion a storm, not a simple task to direct it, not a simple task to overturn the kayak of the cruelest boy, not a simple task to overturn the kayak of the jeering sidekick. Not a simple task to overturn the kayak of the quiet boy who just went along with it. Let them drown then, and spare the good neighbour. The next day there was many a seal closer to the settlement. They'd come into shelter. Though most men searched for the children, some readied their nets and clubs. I saw one man about to strike a young seal. Leave him, I cried out. Can't you see he's my grandson? The boy pulled off the seal skin, and the hunter saw it was true. They found the bodies of the boys a little further down the beach. So that's the beginning of Kiviuk. This is an episode probably 4 or 5 trances later. And this is Kiviuk's encounter with the bee woman. Now, bumblebees shouldn't really belong in the Arctic, but there is a special type of Arctic bee which has more fur. It also has a special muscle system that means stronger muscles, which means it can shiver more. And it also has a way of regulating its blood, which I don't understand. I need to read more about, but that is why Arctic bees, bumblebees, exist. They're different bees. And reading around the topic, even today, bees and insects, although they freak out a lot of people, I think they freak out many Inuit people in particular. Again, I'm just reading around that. I don't swear to the gospel on that, but I was interested to see that. So this is about a woman who is also a bee. Kiviuk is out on the open water again. While he paddles, he remembers meeting another woman a long time before all this began. He'd landed on another shore, and straight away there's a house. Something not right with it? Tumble down, no roof. But smoke, or is it steam coming out the top? It was both. That's the smell of meat cooking. But what meat? Kiviuk couldn't place it. Well, meat's meat. Maybe there's a welcome here. Kiviuk passes a window, casting a shadow into the house. There's a large old woman bumbling about indoors. She's placing skins on her drying rack, and now she's cooking. Oh, clouds, she says. I wasn't expecting that. Meaning Kiviuk's shadow. I'll need to get busy. She gives the pot a vigorous stir. Kiviuk climbs up the house wall and he looks down. He now sees what kind of skins are stretched out in the drying rack. Human skins. Is she a spirit? They say you can tell by looking at the eyes. She's directly beneath him, so he lands a gob of spit right in the center of her head, but she doesn't look up. Oh, rain, she says. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know I had a leak in my roof. Now she does look, but can't see anything because of her bushy eyebrows. She stretches one eyebrow out, cuts it off and puts it into the pot. She does exactly the same with the other one. Then she looks directly up at Kiviuk. Did he just lose his footing? Did he faint? It feels like months, not minutes. Did he actually die? He wakes up in the old woman's bed. Hello, said the woman. A human. Welcome. Rest you. The weather can only get worse. It's clouding over and there have been a few spots of rain. Kiviuk saw some human eyeballs in the stew and a hand. 2 eyebrows bobbed up now and then as she stirred the pot. I've taken your wet things off. Lie down. There's no need to get up. The old woman said in a sing-song voice, almost humming. Kiviuk saw that he was on a narrow bunk edged with human skulls. He saw his parka and boots on the rack. Now, I just have to visit the heather before the downpour. Make yourself at home while I'm gone. She puts on a thick fur coat, which has bands of black and yellow. Then she practically flies out the house. The second the woman buzzes away, one of the skulls starts to speak. Get out of here as soon as you can. You'll end up like us if you're not careful. Kiviot recognizes the voice. It's one of his brothers. We all ended up in the pot, says another skull. She said I was delicious, he says proudly, though he adds, not that that's a consolation. Kiviot puts his boots and his parka back on. The drying rack twitches at his touch, but it's just a twitch. He runs back to his kayak and the snow bunting and tries to make his escape.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard. And congratulations on getting all those different voices. That really reminds one of the oral dimension, the importance of the oral dimension in these stories. And I love the way that you managed to mix the lyric with the storytelling aspect of the tales. I'm sure there are lots of people anxious to put questions to you, but maybe just to kind of kick off, I can ask you just a wee bit about how this whole project came into being. I suppose that with any project like this, there comes a moment when you think to yourself, well, yes, this is really interesting. And then maybe a few moments later, yes, this is really, really interesting. And I really want to create my own version of it, to adapt it and see what I can do by bringing my own voice to the mix, as it were. So was there a kind of eureka moment when you decided, yes, I really want to follow through with this?
Yeah, I think there were two moments. The project began as a small commission from an artist I've worked with for going on for 20 years. Yeah, 20 years, called Ron King, who's an Anglo-Brazilian. And he makes beautiful books, and I've often worked with him, supplying a small number of poems. And he had lived in Canada in the 60s, where he'd come across the Sedna myth, and it clearly stayed with him for years and years, because it was only maybe 5 or 6 years ago that he got in touch with me and said, I'm making this book, I need probably 6 or 7 poems. I like to think of myself as a kind of session poet with Ron. He tells me what the project is, and then I'll sort of cut the poems to the length that he wants. He directed me to some texts about Sedna, and I wrote the poems, but there was so much more. He only wanted to deal with one episode. Partly because of size, it's just not possible to make artist books at that length very easily, and that's what I did. But I began to learn more and more about Sedna, and I was thinking, does anyone know about this? Now, as I later found out, quite a lot of people know the Sedna myth. It is around, it has been covered, so to speak, quite a bit. But I didn't know that then, and I became very, very interested, and sent the whole sequence of Sedna, the owner of the sea, that's a third of the book, to Michael at PN Review. And I hope I'm not mistranslating, but he was very excited. And he published it in the magazine almost straight away. And I think that was the next eureka moment. He said words to the effect, and I hope I can expect more. And I began to get very interested in Kiviot, who's a kind of balancing character to Sedna. So it really was a kind of dual inspiration, one from my long-term artist, and one from my long-term publisher, if you see what I mean.
And you use the word myth there, obviously, and that's that myth and legend. These two terms keep on coming back in the introduction. But I think I remember at one point you seem to be slightly unsure whether whether the word myth is the right word to use in this context. There's a slight ambivalence in your comments on that. Would you want to say a bit about that?
I think myth and legend are usable, but they're distancing words. So would we say that Jesus was a myth or a legend? His crucifixion was a legend or a myth? I don't think we would, and I don't think we should. And I think with these tales, they are spiritual tales. They are more Old Testament than New Testament. If you see what I mean, they're about cruelty, authority, misogyny, and how we read those things. They're not necessarily saying they're good things, but they're certainly presenting them. And they are spiritual works. So I do want to be very careful in approaching that. There's also a sense that reading them and making them into something else, you kind of take it into yourself. So there's a sense that it's no longer those. In another episode in Kippy, he has tongs underneath his bed which keep on snapping at him and won't allow him to get out of bed. He's often prisoner. Maybe myth and legends are sort of tongs which are keeping us away from living our life through the spirit world that they offer. So, and I know that sounds a bit daft. Here I am in North London, wearing my button-up shirt and talking about, the spirit world. But I kind of feel it. I can't articulate it, and maybe that's what the stories are doing.
Mm-hmm. We've got some really great questions coming through, so I'm going to pick out a couple just now. So there's one from Alan Sudlow who says, thanks, Richard, great reading. Not sure if this was the passages you chose, but there seemed to be a sly, macabre or grand guignol element to the tales. Is that something that came through to you in their original form?
So the original form is not something that's available to me. So these are not translations. So these are based on prose summaries, fairly skeletal bone summaries. So in that sense, it's actually very difficult to discern humor or any other tone. They are completely deadpan. And that allowed me a lot of latitude. So the humor there is more priced than Inuit, as far as I know. I think some of the it's in the nature of stories to have ambiguity, particularly foundational stories can be read in all kinds of ways and at the same time. So if we think about Genesis as a sacred text, we can take that very, very seriously and as a very beautiful text, but we can also laugh about it. There are jokes about Adam and Eve, which, as you joke, you don't take away the seriousness of the myth. I have used that word now, haven't I? So there's something about these things operating all at the same time, which I love. When I voice that through my hammy Department of Central Casting, the budget doesn't run to a Hollywood production. So I forgive the cringe factor in my accents. I just thought I wanted to differentiate the voices somehow. and now I've forgotten the end of the sentence. It somehow comes through the energy of a retelling, and I bet when the storytellers were actually telling those stories, which would have lasted a whole evening, there would have been all kinds of different tones employed, but I didn't have access to that. And in a way, I was quite glad. It actually gave me these bones of narratives to work with, and then pour other things in, or in fact, take things out. It was a very, very peculiar experience writing them.
And what about the kind of move from prose to verse? You know, was that a decision that you took very early on?
Yeah, it was. It also sort of keeps me honest. So that's another aspect of so-called translation. I likened it to a 16th century painting of the Nativity. So that's 16 centuries down the line. You're getting European things if it's a European painting. You're getting this focus on a religious sect from the 1st century. We have a few stories about it, which are canonical, lots and lots of stories which aren't. And you're converting that to a completely different format painting. So we are in all kinds of layers of inauthenticity in some ways, and yet I've been very careful about the plot lines. I have tried as much as possible to not make anything materially anachronistic. I'm sure I've got some things wrong, but in terms of tone and speech, time sort of just collapses. It's both modern and really, really ancient. That's my intention anyway.
Nevertheless, you're quite happy to allow different versions of these stories to kind of overlap. It's almost as if we're dealing with palimpsests sometimes.
Yes, so there are variants, and many more variants than I could handle. But I like that. At one point, it's almost an invitation to the audience to say, "Are you going to kill this guy, or are we going to let him? Or are we going to let him free?" You know, because there are different variants. And again, you know, I love that. It's a kind of Brechtian reaching out. It's the fourth wall dissolving, and I really like that.
Okay, we've got some more questions here from members of the audience. Helena Nelson has written, "I was interested in the way you headed little sections with an italic flag about what was coming up next. Can you say something about that structuring decision? At what point did it arrive? Did you originally write in one long string, or were they there from the start?"
That's a good question. They were almost all there from the start, not all of them. And when another one appeared, it was because I realized the poem actually was 2 or 3 poems, and I needed to break it up. On the face of it, it may seem as if it sort of brings more hurdles into the reading of the book, but in actual fact, I think it doesn't. I think it speeds it up. And that goes to one of the things I wanted to happen in the book. I wanted it to be an action poem, where you're sort of going ... and then quickly to the next one, ... quickly to the next one. If you put them all in a long piece, it becomes rather lumpen. There are also real jolts to the headings now and again. Some of them are quite sly. And I like the sense of humor of that. So yeah, they're not really a structuring device. They're a kind of velocity device.
Okay, and we've got another question from Helen Eddy. "Love the voices, especially the drawl of the grandmother and the lively son. Did you hear these voices as you wrote the Kiviuk section? Also, the silent titles, not titles perhaps akin to captions."
Yeah, so the first one, I definitely heard them as differentiated, but I didn't. No, I didn't hear those particular voices as I was writing it. I needed those voices for tonight, so that was in the rehearsals for tonight. But I rather like that, and it's made me see that this is actually, there are theatrical and dramatic things that could be done with this. It could have another life that way. I was sort of surprised by it, by finding that out.
And Lisa Kelly asks, did you go through many different versions or retellings, and how did you finally settle?
No, I didn't. I think that's another quite surprising thing about this poetry collection. I wrote it really, really quickly in 2 bursts. So the whole of Sedna was one of the bursts, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and then Kiviuk a couple of years later, but very, very quickly, very thirstily. Hardly any revisions. I just went with the energy of it. I think it's a poem that goes across, it doesn't go in. It's not pretty. It's if you quote an individual one, apart from a few concentrated lyrics, which are not really connected to the Inuit storytelling, apart from those lyrics, it's not pretty. It's moving fast, and I really like that. I found it liberating. I'm a lyric poet at heart, and sometimes you just don't want to be that. You can think and decorate too much, and to be working really quickly with these incredibly dynamic texts. It was fantastic.
And yet there are some really beautiful lyric moments. Right at the very end of the book, there's a lovely short lyric, "If you live for thousands of years," which asks about the nature of love. And I wondered what the source for that particular lyric actually was, whether it was just a single line maybe in the prose version, and if this was really what you believe the whole collection is fundamentally about.
No, that there isn't a source for that at all. That's one of the lyrics I was talking about. So that is really trying to paper over a discontinuity between 2 episodes towards the end, and so it's like a breathing space. I'll just read it so people know what I'm talking about. If you live for thousands of years, if you live for thousands of years, is love for ordinary mortals foolish? Is it love? Do you protect yourself by trying not to love? Can tenderness only find comprehension between creatures promised death soon enough? Can love only exist between ordinary creatures who cherish the fragile lives they share? So that's trying to bridge really the end of Kiviuk's penultimate relationship with the fox wife, and his next one and last one with the goose wife. And there was such a sharp change there, and it was getting towards the end of the book. I think Kiviuk dramatically needed to think about what he was doing, and that is what that simple lyric is doing.
I mean, there are obviously lots of lots of women's voices in these stories, and in your introduction, you said that this was a slight departure for you as a poet to write. I don't know, a departure in the sense of writing about women or attempting to create women's voices, and there seemed to be a slight hesitation at that point in the introduction. I'm just wondering if you could say more about that.
Yeah, I think that goes to 2 of what I see as the problems one in my own practice. I'm a lyric poet. My poetry is about this particular bloke seeing this and seeing that, experiencing this, experiencing that. If I'm a dramatic poet, it's dramatizing me. It's not dramatizing other voices, by and large. So that's definitely that. And the other thing is the way the Inuit summaries go, there isn't a lot of space for women to speak. So I have kept to the narrative line, but I've allowed them to speak much more. And so that is part of it. In fact, the whole book is an attempt at balancing genders, Sedna to begin with, Kivuk at the end, and then a very fascinating short piece where a woman becomes a man briefly, and then back to being a woman again. So there is an attempt at a kind of balancing architecture in the book.
Okay, we've got one more question here from Geraldine Payne, who asks, will this be published in Canada? Some readings to follow, question mark.
Well, I certainly hope so. In a sense, it's sort of available anywhere you like. So yes, I certainly hope so. But actually, in addition, I have no idea. That's publisher talk. Live readings, yes. I'm cautious about that, but I'm having a tiny wee reading in London in about a week or so, which I will tell Carcanet about at some point soon. But if things were a bit more normal, I'd be more happy about reading live. But I'm still a little bit cautious, and I don't think things are getting better actually. And the news is not great just now in terms of the pandemic.
To sort of end on an upbeat note, however, you know, what just very simply, what was the most enjoyable aspect about this whole project for you? What really continually brought a smile to your lips?
Oh, just to write an energetic book, the energy in the stories, and to be able to somehow channel that poem to poem in a cheeky way, a sinister way, the range that is available through the myths. It was just incredible, and to sort of forget about myself and just write through that energy. I think Kiviuk is my favorite character. He's a very, very bad man, but the energy, absolutely superb. And the creaturely humans, the humanish creatures, that interchange is just wonderful.
Okay, and we've got one other question which we've probably just got time for. Robin Chang writes, love this reading. Thank you, Richard. I'm wondering what type, if any, of limitations you might have encountered concerning using English for this project.
I'm now going to be joined by Rory. We're treating this as a launch. We should be drinking seal blood.
Hello, Rory. Welcome.
He is the reason why we haven't been talking about completely adult things, but he has been here. So I didn't find the English limiting at all. I wrote pretty plainly, and I found it pretty quick to do so. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think if there's any more questions, we probably still got time for one more. Anybody have any thoughts? Okay, well, I think I'm going to hand back to Jasmine at this point and just thank Richard immensely for a wonderful reading and for giving us the gift of this this marvelous series of tales. I'm really looking forward to reading it again and hearing all those voices that I've been introduced to this evening. Thanks very much, Richard.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you both so much. I just want to reiterate that thanks and congratulations to you, Richard, on the new book. It was a real pleasure to hear you read tonight and to hear you guys talk about it. And it was nice to see Rory at the end. That was fun. Hello. So thank you all for being here and for helping to celebrate this launch. I am putting the link in the chat for you now. You can click on that and you can buy the book immediately. With that discount code, you'll get £2 off. But if you don't want to do that right now, just check your inbox tomorrow. You'll also get an email. And if you have any problems with that, just get in touch with Becky or I, and we'll be able to help you. So before we say goodnight, I just want to remind you that next week, at the same time, 7 p.m, we're launching Jason Allen Payzant's debut collection. He will be talking to Malika Booker. So if you check our website, then please join us again for the next Carcanet book launch. As ever, I will probably leave the chat open for a couple of minutes so you guys can get your final messages in. But I'll turn all of our cameras off now. So I'll say thank you and good night and congratulations again, Richard, and thank you all very much.